For more than 4 decades, one woman carried a secret she promised never to tell. She was not a celebrity, not a musician, not a member of Elvis Presley's famous inner circle. But she lived closer to him than almost anyone else. She was his maid, the quiet observer who walked the halls of Graceland, who saw the king of rock and roll not as the icon the world adored, but as the man behind the legend, flawed, lonely, and haunted by fame. Now, after 45 years of silence, her story has finally emerged. It's a confession filled with heartbreak, hidden truth, and moments so personal they could only have come from someone who was truly there. This is not the Elvis we see in movies or magazine covers. This is Elvis Presley as he was when the spotlight faded. Fragile, unpredictable, and burdened by the cost of being the most famous man in the world. The maid's account begins in the mid-1960s, when she was first hired to help maintain the Graceland estate. She was young, shy, and deeply respectful, but she quickly noticed something about Elvis that most outsiders never could: the duality of his nature. In public, he was a star whose every move sent fans into a frenzy. But at home, he was a man trapped by his own myth. She recalls how Elvis treated the staff with warmth and generosity on most days. He could be charming, funny, even childlike. He loved to joke, to sing snippets of gospel in the kitchen, and to surprise the workers with unexpected gifts. He never wanted to appear unkind, yet beneath his smile lingered an unmistakable sadness, one that grew heavier as the years went by. According to her memories, Graceland was not just a home. It was a fortress, a gilded cage that kept Elvis isolated from the world. As fame consumed him, so did his fears. He trusted very few people. Even those closest to him often found themselves shut out when he felt betrayed or vulnerable. The maid remembers long, sleepless nights when Elvis would wander through the mansion, restless and distant. Sometimes he would talk to himself, or hum softly while pacing the halls. Other times, he would sit at the piano in the dark, playing slow, mournful tunes that no one else ever heard. These were not performances for applause. They were private moments, the kind that revealed how deeply fame had scarred him. She also describes the peculiar routines that became part of his daily life. Elvis was particular about his appearance and personal habits, often changing clothes several times a day. His diet was unpredictable. He could go from lavish meals to days of barely eating. He surrounded himself with friends and family. Yet she says he seemed lonelier than ever. What struck her most was his kindness to animals. Elvis adored his dogs and horses, treating them with tenderness and patience. She often found him sitting quietly in the stables, stroking a horse's mane or whispering softly as if confiding secrets no one else could understand. But the closer the maid became to his private world, the more she saw the darker side of Graceland. The pills, the exhaustion, the pressure from constant expectations. Elvis was not just battling the physical toll of his lifestyle, he was wrestling with something deeper. The sense that his identity no longer belonged to him. She recalls seeing him sitting alone in the jungle room, lost in thought, staring at nothing for minutes at a time. When she timidly asked if he needed anything, he would sometimes smile faintly and say, "Just peace, honey. Just a little peace." Over the years, she watched as the king's health began to deteriorate. His once vibrant energy dimmed. The laughter that used to echo through Graceland became rare. Friends came and went, and the walls seemed to close in tighter each year. The maid says that by the mid-1970s, the house no longer felt like the home of a superstar. It felt like a shrine to a man who was slowly disappearing before everyone's eyes. She remembers one haunting night, not long before his death, when Elvis asked her to sit with him for a while. He spoke quietly, telling her that he often felt trapped, not by the mansion, but by the image the world demanded he live up to. "They all want the king," he told her, "but nobody wants to see the man behind the crown." She never forgot those words. When the day of his death arrived in August 1977, she was one of the first people inside the mansion to sense something was terribly wrong. The atmosphere that morning felt heavy, unreal. She heard whispers among the staff, the sound of hurried footsteps, and then silence. The news spread through Graceland like a shock wave. The king was gone. In the days that followed, she kept working quietly, cleaning rooms that suddenly felt like time capsules. Elvis's toothbrush still sat by the sink. His clothes were neatly folded in the closet. The radio in his room still played softly, as if waiting for him to return. After the funeral, many staff members left, unable to face the emptiness that hung over the estate. But she stayed. For years, she continued her duties at Graceland, helping to preserve the memory of the man she had once known so intimately. She refused every offer to speak publicly about her experience. She declined interviews, book deals, and media attention. Her silence became an act of loyalty, a promise to the man who had trusted her with his most private moments. But time changes everything. As she grew older, she began to feel the weight of what she had kept hidden. She knew that history had painted a version of Elvis Presley that was both glorious and tragic, but incomplete. Before her passing, she decided to tell her story, not to profit from it, but to bring humanity back to the myth. Her account is not filled with scandal or sensational claims. It is, instead, a portrait of a deeply complex man, kind, insecure, burdened by fame and desperate for love and understanding. She describes how, even at his lowest points, Elvis remained caring and considerate toward those who served him. He thanked her often, and even in moments of anger or frustration, he would later apologize, insisting he never meant harm. The maid's recollections also reveal moments of surprising humility. She remembers how Elvis would sometimes walk barefoot through the halls, dressed simply, humming gospel hymns. He often spoke about his mother, Gladys, and how much he missed her guidance. He believed she was still watching over him, especially during times when he felt lost. In her telling, the tragedy of Elvis Presley was not that he died young. It was that he lived for so long without truly being understood. The adoration of millions could not fill the emptiness he carried inside. Fame gave him everything, except peace. Her testimony ends with a powerful reflection. She said that despite everything, the chaos, the loneliness, the decline, Elvis never stopped being grateful. He always said thank you, she recalled. Even when his hands were shaking, even when he could barely stand, he'd whisper, "Thank you, honey." That's who he was. After she passed away, her family chose to release her story, fulfilling her final wish to share what she had seen and felt. Not to expose Elvis, but to remind the world that the man they called the king was, at his core, human, tender, flawed, and deserving of compassion. Her words pull back the curtain on the myth and reveal a truth that few ever knew. Elvis Presley wasn't just a superstar. He was a man who loved deeply, struggled silently, and lived his life surrounded by people who adored him, but rarely saw his pain. Through the eyes of the woman who served him faithfully for decades, we see a side of Elvis the world never got to witness. Not the performer, not the legend, but the soul behind the song.